You're welcome.
Well, can you hear me? Raise it a little. In welcoming you to this March meeting of the Culinary Historians of Ann Arbor, my name is Randy Schwartz. I'm with the CHAA. We're pleased that you can be with us, whether in person or online, for today's talk by Charlie Singh on popcorn as a food, a crop, and a business. I want to thank our host for today's program, the Ann Arbor District Library, which provides promotional and technical support for us. They also make it possible for our programs to be shared beyond the walls of the library by live streaming them and by recording and posting many of them on the library's YouTube channel, AADL TV. For the new viewers and visitors today, here's a little information about the Culinary Historians of Ann Arbor. We're an informal group bringing together all sorts of people who are interested in the history and culture of food and cooking. The group was founded in 1983, and new members are always welcome. We have monthly talks like this one from September to May. Some of them are in person here at the library, and others are online only, depending on the speaker's proximity to Ann Arbor. We also have twice yearly potluck theme meals, usually in July and December. Our theme meal for the July meal this year has just been decided. It's going to be wedding dishes from around the world. If you're not a member of CHAA, we'd love to have you join us. Our membership is only $25 a year for either an individual or a couple, and it includes a subscription to our quarterly magazine, Repast, which there are some sample copies of on the table in the side. A postal subscription to Repast is only $20 a year, no matter what country you happen to live in. If you'd like to join our group or just to subscribe to Repast, you can find the information on our website, culinaryhistoriansannarbor.org, by clicking on the membership tab there. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for Culinary Historians of Ann Arbor and like our page to get our news into your timeline. Or if you're here in person, you can pick up a membership form also at the side table. After the talk, we have some snacks for you to try related to the topic. Some Pop Daddy flavored popcorn locally made in Howell, Michigan, and some lemonade and other citrus aids from Bush's, which is another local food purveyor. And now I'm honored to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Charles Singh is Emeritus Professor of Human Genetics at the University of Michigan Medical School. He grew up in northern Illinois on his family's farm, studied agronomy at Iowa State University. Then he earned a master's degree in plant breeding and statistics at Kansas State University and a Ph.D. in genetics and statistics at North Carolina State University. In 1966, he was hired at the U of M, where his research group became recognized internationally for its research findings on the variability in people's genetic risk of developing complex disorders like hypertension, high cholesterol, and heart disease. He authored or co-authored nearly 200 journal articles and the textbook Genetics. And in 1996, he was awarded the Elmer G. Hine Visiting Lectureship at Kansas State University. By the time he retired in 2017, he had mentored 25 doctoral students and postdocs, and then on the side, he'd begun developing hybrid strains of popcorn as a hobby, which later grew into a business, as you'll hear. Charlie lives with his wife, Janet, in CO Township, just west of Ann Arbor, and he has a farm nearby on Zeeb Road. Let's give a warm welcome to Charlie Singh.
Well, thank you. I think probably I can talk without any audio. Now, can you hear me, Owen? Okay, so I'm going to talk. Holy cow. My gosh. Who is, oh boy, there's, okay, let's get started. First of all, a little about, Randy, there was a couple of things on there that was, my wife passed years ago, so that brings emotional to my eyes, as you can imagine. Okay, a little bit about Charlie to start. Yes, I spent the first 20 years of my life farming with my dad, okay? We had a general farm in west of Joliet, west of Chicago, about 60 miles. And the first memory I had was my dad shouting at me. I was about 5 years old. Charles, it's time to get up to milk the cows, okay? So I milked the cows, or went to high school and grade school, and the nearest neighbor was only a mile. So it gives you some idea of the landscape from which I come. At the age of 20, I was drafted into the Army. I was intending to be the farmer, being the oldest German son of an oldest German son. But after I came back from Korea, or I wasn't in Korea, I was drafted during the Korean War. Fortunately, I didn't go to Korea. My brother was farming the farms. So at the age of 20, I went into the academy. And I was in the academy from age 20 till 2017. First at Iowa State in agronomy, crops and soils. Then in Kansas State, I wanted to be a plant breeder, a wheat breeder. And then on to North Carolina State for a Ph.D. So basically, I spent most of my life in the academy, but my heart and soul is still in the landscape out there in Illinois. And this farm that I have, this small farm, is my home. Now, we should start at the beginning of the slides. I don't think we have the beginning here, but let's get started. Okay, I'm going to talk about 3 different aspects of popcorn. How are we doing in the back row? Okay, the first is I'm going to give rather a thorough, deeper than many of you would like to hear, discussion about what a corn plant is and what a popcorn plant is, okay? The second is I want to discuss with you and share with you popcorn is a crop. Most of the commodity crops like corn, soybeans, cotton, those are very familiar to most people, but not popcorn. You know, what's happening in the popcorn field. And then the businesses that are associated with popcorn. So first of all corn belongs to the same genus and species, Zea maize, okay? And the plant itself is dependent on humans for survival. It cannot survive on its own in the wild. The reason for that is if an ear falls on the ground, on the soil, then they germinate, compete with each other, and basically no one seed will give rise to a plant, okay? With regard to the questions, I'll entertain questions with some risk that I might just take off and talk about something else, okay? So if it's really not critical, maybe we should wait till the end, okay? I think that's probably best for me. Now, dependent upon us for survival, there is no equivalent to Zea maize in the wild, okay? It started off, and then there's some controversy about what the ancestors of maize are. There were more than one possibly. Produces up to 500 kernels per ear. The ear, you know, I'm sorry, this is not going to be easy. Well, everybody knows where the ear is, okay? The ear is down here at the bottom, the tassels at the top, the leaves, and the roots. Very basic, okay? A high-yielding hybrid corn will yield 500 kernels per ear. So you can take one seed, plant it, and get 500 seeds. That's one of the reasons why it's grown so widely around the world, is it really produces a lot of yield. Now, the corns that we have today were domesticated by the native Middle American Indians over the last 6 to 10,000 years, okay? So here's what the natives came up with. They came up with just about everything you can imagine in terms of shape of the ear, shape of the kernels, color, how long it took for the plant to mature. All of this variability was perpetuated by the Indians as they domesticated corn, okay? And in the process, they came up with basically 6 different classes of corn. My voice is giving out on me, I'm sorry about that. First is dent corn. Dent corn is, farmers don't call it dent corn, they call it cattle corn, okay? It's the corn that's grown on about 93 million acres in the United States. Sweet corn, we all know what sweet corn is. Popcorn, flint corn, flour corn, and pod corn. The last one, pod corn, you probably haven't heard about. It's a corn, the kernel is surrounded by its leaves of the flower. So it's fully encased by a part of the cob. Okay, so there's the main differences, the primary differences among these corns is the nature of the starch in the kernel, okay? And popcorn has a very different starch, say, than flour corn or flint corn. So these are the basic corns that were developed by the Native Americans over the centuries. Okay, now the plant begins with a seed, of course. It may be a little confusing as I go along because seed and kernel are basically the same. You plant a seed and you eat a kernel sort of thing, okay? How am I doing, Randy? Okay. Randy is my judge. He stands in judgment of me. I mean, I am really nervous, Randy. Okay. Now, this seed happens to be a dent kernel, but it would be the same structures for all kernels. So we start off with the pericarp. The pericarp is the outside of the seed, and that has the genetic makeup of the parent plant that it's growing on. So that's the ear is mother, and this pericarp on the outside is we call it mother tissue. It's the same genotype as the plant it's growing on. And the endosperm is the storage energy for the seed when the embryo germinates. So it calls upon the metabolically, uses the endosperm for the embryo to grow until the plant gets into a stage where it can proceed on its own using photosynthesis to give its energy, okay? Now, let's go on. By the end of the lecture, I'll figure out what left and right on this thing. Okay. Okay, now you start with, first of all, why are the seeds orange or colored? These seeds have been treated with both an insecticide and a fungicide, which is traditional for what you might call the industrial farming that's going on in America. Start off with a seed. The first sign of growth will be the tissue that's going to develop into the first root. It's called the radicle, okay? So the radicle's growing down, and then the tissue that's going to make the stalk and the plant that's going to rise above the ground is the coleoptile. Now that may be a little bit more than you wanted to know, but I decided to tell you anyway. Okay, so this is a germinating seed. Okay, now here is the progression from the germinating seed up until each of these stages has certain morphological characteristics, and plant biologists or corn geneticists talk in these stages. We won't go into that. What I want to call to your attention, we start over here on the left with a seed, and over here on the right, we have a seedling that has all of the tissues now that are going to develop into the mature plant, okay? Down here at you see the seed and the development of the roots. The radicle is the large root. The plumeal, the coleoptile goes up a plumeal, and within this plant are the first evidences of the ear, the tassel, and all of the leaves that are going to be on the plant, okay? Wow, I did it. I got it. Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the plant. You know, some of this is so trivial to someone who, like myself, and hangs around farmers. But I come to realize, being on the interface between the agricultural and the urban world, that a lot of these things, a lot of these issues haven't been a part of your daily conversation, okay? Okay, there are two, it's a warm season grass. That means that it tolerates higher temperatures and does better at higher temperatures. There are cool season grasses that grow well in the spring, and when the heat comes on in the summer, they sort of slow down, okay? So corn is a warm season grass. Secondly, the plants can be from 2 to 10 foot tall, and I'm going to show some plants as we proceed here. Oh, where's the clock? Oh, there's the clock, okay. I'll show plants of different heights for different reasons. Now, the male and the female flowers are on the same plant, but they're in different places on the plant, okay? Many plants have the male and the female in the same flower. This is not the case with Zea mays or corn. The flowers only have a male or female parts. So up here at the top of the plant, the tassel is the male organ of the corn plant. And that's where the sperm are produced. And down, about halfway down, is the ear, and that's where the female flowers, and that's where the eggs are developed, okay? So to produce a seed, we've got to get the male sperm down to the female egg, and that's really easy in the population because there's so many sperm out there, okay? A tassel will produce 2 to 6 million pollen grains, depending upon the size. Okay, now each grain, this gets a little complicated. It's actually incredible to me how this all evolved, and been very fascinated for most of my lifetime about the anatomy of the corn plant. Each grain has 2 sperms, okay? A pollen grain, and I'll show here's a pollen grain down here at the left. Pollen grains coming out of the tassel, okay? Those little yellow spots there that you see sort of dripping out of a spike on the tassel. That is a pollen grain. Inside of that pollen grain, there are 2 sperm. Then theoretically, 500 plants would be enough to pollinate a 100-acre field. That's how many pollen grains that are in one of those tassels. And corn is a wild pollen, wild pollen. That's a bad slip. Corn is a wind-pollinated outcrossing species. So the air is just filled with pollen when you're out there, when a plant is at a certain stage and is shedding pollen. It gets all, when you're doing plant breeding and you're out in the field, you get covered with this pollen grains. So And that means that if you go to an ear in that field, every ear may have a different sperm head combined with an egg. An ear has all these eggs on it where the kernels are going to be. In comes a cloud of pollen, and there's a potential for every one of those seeds to have a different sperm. Now, I'm going to expand on that just a little bit now. Now, here's what we have over in a little larger, enlarged. Up at the top are what are called silk, okay? You've seen them, I'm sure, on sweet corn or that sort of thing when you go. The silk is basically what's called a pollen tube, okay? And then you see each pollen tube goes down to a potential kernel, where the egg is in each of those. So we have a whole, you can imagine an ear of corn. It's got all these kernels. Each one of those kernels has an egg, and it's connected in the early stages to a pollen tube that goes to the exterior that exposes it to the pollen grains. Okay, now let's. Okay, oh boy, how are we doing? Are we doing okay? Oh, wow, I think I'll continue. Okay. Now, a 100-acre field has about 3 million plants, or approximately 1.5 billion kernels, okay? A little aside bar about the pollen grain and how promiscuous a field of popcorn is that one of the studies that was done by one of my friends at Iowa State, he did a study, and he found that pollen can go in a right day, right temperature, right humidity. A pollen can travel as much as 15 miles, okay? That is one thing that I should point out is you have these different kinds of corn. The only reason why we can have popcorn in just about any state where every state has dent corn is that popcorn is dent sterile. In other words, if a pollen grain falls on a dent corn or cattle corn or traditional corn that you see in the fields, if one of those pollen grains falls, it'll die before it gets down to the egg. Okay. That happens to be quite a thing because it's pretty hard to grow anything that is isolated from corn in this country. I mean, dent corn. Each kernel is attached to a silk, as I mentioned, a pollen tube. The silk serves as a channel for carrying the sperm to an egg in each kernel, okay? So the pollen grain falls on that, it germinates, and it goes down the tube, and it has 2 sperm. And I'll try not to make this too complicated, but to me it's very fascinating. One sperm fertilizes the egg, and you have the beginning of a new embryo, okay? The other sperm fertilizes 2 of the mother's cells and creates the endosperm. So the kernel of corn is made up of mother-father genes, the endosperm, 2 mothers and 1 father's genes, and the out pericarp has 2 copies of the mother's genes, okay? Now, whoever thought that up, the Indians didn't do it. Oh, I like you guys. You're not taking this that serious. It takes 12 to 24 hours to fertilize an egg after the pollen lands on the sperm. The pollen grains falls on the silk. Okay, now I was thinking ahead of myself. Here we go. Now here's the plant at harvest. Okay, this may seem trivial, but this is one of the hybrids that I'm going to talk about shortly. There's not much more to say about that, I don't believe. Okay, now I'm going to move on from the plant to the crop. We can come back if you have questions about the plant later, okay? Beth says that's okay. Okay. I don't know where I'm at. I have no idea where I'm at. Okay. First of all, popcorn is not a bioengineered organism, okay? I often am asked, is your popcorn GMO? And I said, gosh, all popcorn, all corn is GMO. The Native American Indians genetically modified it to create popcorn, sweet corn, dent corn, as I said at the beginning. And it has to do with something that always comes up when you're interfacing between, a urologist and a neurologist and a proctologist, is that often the language is different, okay? Maybe I overdid that, okay? The next one is, there is no hull-less popcorn. At least there's going to be 50 people who are going to understand that. There has to be a hull on the outside to hold the endosperm and the embryo and give it structure. Growing requirements for all corn are about the same. It's very difficult, unless you know where you're at in America, that whether you're driving by a popcorn field or a dent corn field or a flint corn field, all the plants are pretty much going to look the same. Some of us who've had some experience can guess pretty much the case by where you're at. If you're in Indiana or you're in Nebraska in the Platte River Valley, or if you're in Ohio down here, you know the neighborhood, and you know the neighborhood's growing popcorns. Okay, it requires a longer growing season so the kernels will dry out in the field, okay? And I'll get at the end, say a little bit more about that, because most of the corn is harvested, the dent corns and the other corns, at about 20 to 25% moisture, and then they dry it down in either with heat or there's several ways of going at it. But if you try to put heat on popcorn to dry it down, of course, it really affects its popping characteristics. So they bring it in at about 18% and then let it dry naturally down to about 13, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So here's the crop. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit more time about this, and hopefully the impact of this presentation is that the popcorn industry is a very small industry. I think it's a bit bigger than rutabagas or carrots or something like that, but there's only there's only three. I say there's only. These statistics are assembled by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Each farmer gets who grows crops of any kind, whether animals or plants, gets a survey each year and fills it out and says how many acres they're doing this and that. So these are reported acres of popcorn in the United States in 23, and that's 300,000. Now that may seem like a lot of acres, but you want to compare that with 93 million acres of commodity or dent corn. There's not a state in the union that does not raise some corn. Even Alaska, they may not raise it for grain, but they will chop it up for silage and use it for cattle feed, okay? The number one in 2023 was Nebraska. Now, why in Nebraska? There's several reasons. One is one of the largest seed companies, Zanger Seed, is at North Loop, Nebraska, and they've perpetuated it, they've encouraged it, a popcorn industry there. Because the industry, as I'll show in a few minutes when we get to the business part of it, has to have a processor that will process the corn out of the field and then package it and get it, wholesale it to the retail market. So in Nebraska, they've got at Preferred Popcorn at Aurora, Nebraska, is the largest processor in the country. Indiana's second. It used to be first. By the way, I didn't know Redenbacher. I sat in this taxi one time when he got out and I got in, but I did not know him personally, okay? I did know his grandson, by the way. That's another story. Illinois is number 4, and then Ohio. I'll come back up here to the top. I decided to start at the bottom, of course. 4% of that corn is novelty corn. Wanda, where's the bottle of corn? Yeah, okay. Okay, this is what we call novelty corn in the popcorn industry. It'll take an ear of corn, and the ears of corn are probably 10 cents a piece. Puts 5 ears in there and charges $7.99 for that at a novelty store. The largest one in North America right now is over in Tillsonburg, Ontario. His name is Blair Townsend, and he ships one or sometimes 2 containers of corn like that to London. Okay, it's either in a bottle or in a shrink wrap. Okay, and the argument is you take it out, put it into a microwave, and you pop it on the ear, sort of thing. Then Crate and Barrel and David, Harry and David, when you get the catalog, they have these kind of novelty gifts that you give somebody who isn't really into popcorn, but they think it's cute, sort of thing. This is the 2023. 6% of the production of the acres now. 6% of the acres. There's a difference between the acres and the production, of course. The acres, 6% white, 90% yellow, and down at the bottom of the 90% of the yellow strains, 15% of that goes into what's called the snack food market, where it's covered with sugar or syrup, a flavor, or with spices. And I think Randy said he brought some from Big Daddy, and that corn has, for the most part, spices on. And 85% is butterfly. And the difference between the flakes is that the mushroom are like little balls. And so that you can put them through a processing that you can coat them without breaking the flake apart. And the butterfly, as it indicates, it bursts open, and it is for eating tenderness, okay? Now, I'm running the risk of getting into too much detail. Okay, I'm counting on you. Okay, let's go to the top. Now, the pounds that have been processed by these 300,000, that happens to be in 22. 1,100,000,000 pounds were grown in the United States. By the way, worldwide, there's about 1 million acres of popcorn. And that's another sidebar here that I don't want to go into today. I'll mention it at the end when we get into breeding of the popcorn and what Amaizin Pop does in the developing strains of popcorn. 900,000 is consumed in the United States, and 900 million, and 200 million are exported. The Shumways over at just the other side of Jackson, they export most all of their corn. It goes to Egypt. And there's a broker in Egypt that passes the corn on to retailers in that Middle East region. Okay, I don't want to tear you on that. Okay, we've talked about the crop, and let's talk now about the businesses. We'll start up here in the upper right-hand corner. We're going to run into some language issues, and I'll do my best to bring you along. Developing inbred strains. Okay, I'm going to be using the word inbreeding and inbred. An inbred strain of popcorn is that every kernel or every plant in that strain has the same genetic makeup. Okay? It's identical twins millions of times, sort of thing. That's not a good one, but you'll accept it. You get the idea. Then the next, and there's a business to that, and we have a small business to develop inbred strains, and I'll turn to that in a moment. Then there's producing hybrid seeds for the farmers to grow using those inbred strains. Okay, a hybrid is the cross between two inbreds. One inbred is used as the mother, and one inbred is used as the father. And that hybrid seed is what the farmers plant. And the story about the discovery of hybrid corn and that sort of thing is legend. Secretary of State under FDR, he really perpetuated it. He founded the Pioneer Seed Company out there in Des Moines, or at West Des Moines. Then the farmers have got a business of growing the hybrid to produce the seed that we eat. And then there's processing the harvested corn for the market. Those are the processors. And then they pass it on to the marketing the corn to consumers. Now there's a relationship between the processing the harvested corn and developing inbred strains and hybrids, because the processors decide what kind of corn they want, okay? So they are in communication with because you don't want to have a hybrid that no one will eat, sort of thing. And so over here, there's not a market, so the processors, they tell the breeders what we want, and then but they buy the seed. Okay, farmer doesn't buy the seed, the processor buys the seed, and then contracts back to the farmers to grow that seed. Are we doing okay? Okay. Okay, now, let's move on here. I still got time, I can't believe it. Okay. Okay, let's go. What we're talking about is developing inbred strains here, and then I'll bring it into this as we go along. But I'll say the most about the inbred strain. So Amaizin Pop, let me give you a little history behind Amaizin Pop. I was a professor. I don't really know what that means, so don't ask me, okay? But my wife knew what it was, okay? I spent too damn much time working on my research. So she came to me more than once and said, Charlie, you gotta have a hobby, okay? Well, being born and raised and my soul being out there in the land, I had to do something with corn, you know? I was surrounded by corn for the first 20 years, so it's in my soul, as I've said a number of times. So I connected with a former professor who he had out of Kansas State and Manhattan. His hobby was breeding corn, and he and I worked together until he passed back in the late 80s. Oh, well, I'd say maybe 92. I'm not sure on years. At my age, who cares what year it was? I mean, I'm having too much fun with myself. Okay, there are two things that Amaizin Pop does. In fact, the logo I'm very proud of. I handed Jan a book of the Zea mays in all the different forms, popcorn, dent corn, all those that were drawn by an illustrationist about how to identify these different corns morphologically. It's a book about this thick. And so we were on our way to Hawaii, about over California. I'd always go past California. Okay, stay out of California. Okay, she came up with that. It's the cross section of an ear of corn. Oh gosh. Well, okay. So there's two things that we do. The primary, develop inbred strains, and then to get to know people who eat popcorn, we have a small local wholesale business, okay? Let's start on the developing the inbred strains. Now, I'm so glad I put this slide in here. I am so glad. There she is, the young lady in the blue, with sunglasses on the top, that's blushing right now. That's her right there. Yeah. Oh, dear. And that's her brother. And that's her other brother. Oh, dear. I tell you, Owen, if you stick with it long enough, maybe you'll get your face in a picture also out of the farm. Okay, you start by planting 6,000 to 10,000 seeds that each are genetically different, okay? And here, you know, are I call them my surrogate grandchildren. Well, I could go on. I'm so fortunate to have access to young people. Okay, so what we're doing here is in the spring, we're planting I don't know, each year it would be different depending upon how the program was going. Let's just say 6,000 to 10,000 here. Here's an example of what the nursery looks like. It's about an acre and a half. And the reason why some of these rows do not have seed in them is because I'm planting them at different times so that they'll synchronize so that the male and the female will come up and what they call a nick, so that they will fertilize each other, or we have the capability of them. One doesn't mature faster than the other, okay? Okay, how do you develop an inbred strain? Self-pollinate superior plants. So you go through the 6,000 to 10,000, let's just say 6,000 plants, and you go down and I said, that's one we're going to save. The rest will bypass. And out of the, say, 6,000, we'll come up with 250 to 500 plants that fit my vision about what a good corn plant looks like. And this is traditional plant breeding. This is the way that the Native Americans did it, okay? No biotechnology, no transgenes, no messing with the CRISPR and the DNA. Plant seeds of those plants and repeat the cycle 5 to 10 generations, okay? It's pretty simple, but it's a lot of work. Over here is how we do that. Up at the top where the tassel is, we put a bag over the tassel to keep the pollen away from the ear or the eggs or the mother. And the little white envelope there is keeping those shoots, we call them shoots, to so they won't be pollinated until I'm ready to move the pollen from the top to the bag. So to inbreed, you put a bag on the top and a bag over the ear, and when it comes time, you take the pollen up there and you put it on the ear of the same plant. And you do that over and over. There'll probably be 100 seeds on there. We'll take another 20 seeds, because at the beginning, you started off with all this genetic variability, and you want to bring it down, and you want to control it. And an inbred line, you know that it only has one genotype. Now, I'll expand on that in the next slide. No equations in these slides so far, right? Randy, would you have put an equation in these? Okay, now, okay, up at the top, we have these 6,000 different genotypes, and you'll know that our G, the mother say was R, and the father's G, and the mother was D, and everyone had a different mother-father. And then we self-pollinate, tassel down to the ear on the same plant, the 5 to 10 generations, and we come up with a plant that only has the same genotype in the mother and the father side. ZZ and CC came out of that original plant. And what we do is we keep pedigrees as we go down here as to what plants produced which plants, produce which plants. Now the inbred strains, each plant and each strain has the same genotype. Now this is the best I could do to come up without going into a lot of details about, Darwin and Mendel and Punnett squares and all that stuff that you see in the genetics text. How am I doing, Ruth? Really? Okay, good. Oh boy, okay, here we go. So these are all inbred strains that have been pollinated. We start pollination about the July 20th, and it'll be over by the 10th of August, about 20 days. So you can see the variability. There are 2 rows for each inbred. So here's an inbred that's tall and it's homozygous. Notice how every plant looks the same. And over here are shorter ones. They look the same down the line, but they're different than this inbred line. Okay, we won't spend any more time on that. So here is the product of Amaizin Pop breeding at this point. There are 13 Amaizin Pop inbreds that are under contract with the Schlesman Seed Company in Milan, Ohio, and they're going to use these inbred lines as the father, as a sperm donor in hybrid production. So we've got the inbred lines in the first step of developing hybrids. Now, how do we get a hybrid? Okay. Here's creating a hybrid that will be grown by farmers. Now, it's really, I wonder how this all emerges, because the farmers are really picky. They want to make money, okay? The processors, they don't care about what the farmer's doing. They want to sell popcorn to the retail market. Just a quick sidebar, the market now for seed and the popcorn industry is expanding. It's in places like India, Turkey, Russia, where they haven't had popcorn in the past, and it's been imported from the United States or Brazil, okay? So that market would be different. If you've got 3 hectares of farm in India, they're going to want a different kind of popcorn than somebody was out in the Platte River Valley who's got 500 acres, turns the water around from the aquifer down there, then turns it off to dry it down. I mean, that's industrial popcorn. But where the market's expanding are in these other cultures, these other agricultural communities. So back to the main track here. These are the 2 inbred strains here on the right. I represent them as AA and BB. Those, this is before the tassel was far enough along to put a bag on it. But I did cover the shoots on the plants. Some of the plants don't need to do it on all in an inbred line to keep it virgin until I'm ready to bring in some pollen. Now, this is the hybrid strain that comes from these 2 parents. So one of these was the male, the other one was the female. And you can see that it's incredible. We still don't know to today the biology, the molecular biology, which underlies how you can put 2 very inferior popcorn plants together and get a superior one. The biology of hybrid vigor we have not reached the point where we can understand it from the molecular, cellular point of view. A lot of ideas, okay. Now, so here's the hybrid seed production. The AA, and this is a bit redundant from what I've said so far, but I think it might help make the point maybe a bit clearer. An inbred, we'll call it the AA inbred, is going to provide the sperm from the tassel. That's going to be transferred over to the BB female, and the B eggs are on the ear. The sperm comes from the AA inbred, and the seed on these plants is going to be the AB hybrid. It's grown by farmers then to produce the corn that we eat. Okay. Now here's here's what's happening in the field. Here's Amaizin Pop inbred AA. It's the label I put on it, or that we put on it, is Amaizin Pop 96H. 96H was declared an inbred that was ready for commercial, involved in developing commercial hybrids in 1996. So that tells you how far back I've had a garden with popcorn in it. The last time I released 4, and they were in 2020. No nursery this year at all. So the Amaizin Pop inbred, you'll notice it has the tassels on it. Over here is Schlesman Seed Company, Milo, Ohio. They have an inbred line, or an inbred strain that's a female. So what happens is that the pollen from the AA inbred falls on the ear or the silk to fertilize the eggs on their inbred. And when you harvest that seed, it's an AB hybrid. And yes?
What happens, can you have a BA hybrid too? Because they
No,
mix
no,
each other?
because there's no tassel on the
Oh,
bee.
there's no tassel, okay.
Okay, when if you're in one of the areas in Illinois, Iowa, where they produce hybrid seed, the typical thing is when there's not a lot of jobs around in the summer is get an internship at a seed company and pull tassels off of plants. Okay, emasculating corn plants for the summer sort of thing. How am I doing, Randy? Okay. Randy's my judge here. Yeah. I don't want to embarrass Randy. So this is down in a seed field down just south of Sandusky. And you harvest the seed from this ear again, I'm repeating myself, that's been pollinated by sperm from this other plant, but it can't get any pollen from its own plant. Okay? So you harvest, what they do is they go through and cut this out, this whole row. They got a machine that goes through and cuts that whole row out. And then they'll bring a machine in and harvest the rows that don't have a tassel on it. And that'll be the seed, okay? That, that the farmers will grow. And here's an example of Schlesman's 4197. At the risk of having the State Department being monitoring this talk, this hybrid first went commercial in Russia, just east of Maykov, Russia. There's a little town about 40 miles in from the Black Sea. The Russians, I said earlier, have to have a processing plant. Who built the processing plant and installed the John Deere dealers there? A guy from North Dakota, okay, who had family coming out of Ukraine. He goes over, farms in the United States, and then he goes back and buys up a state farm, about 30,000 acres. And they then build a processing plant. And then they had corn. They had 10,000 acres in there last year. Okay, so that's one of the hybrids. Now, wholesale locally grown corn. First of all, many of you know what popcorn is. There are 3 popcorns that we market. At the beginning, when I started, I used to grow the corn, bottle it, clean it, and the first customer was Arbor Farms. Leo Fox was just getting started. It was 1980, and I didn't know the difference between wholesale and retail. I mean, I said, Leo says to me, well, how much are you going to charge? And I said, well, how much are you going to charge? That's how much I knew about business. I don't know a lot more about it yet. But the white and the red is grown by John Alexander over here on Jennings Road. He has a land that he grows popcorn on Northfield Church Road. And Big Daddy uses the red for their coating corn. The white and the yellow comes from the grower over there in Jackson. So wholesale, small group, Agrico, Arbor Farms, everybody knows in this room. I don't have to go into it. We're going to make it right. Got 3 minutes left. Okay. Now, there are 2 things about popcorn that I want to pass on that often come up, which will make your popcorn experience, I think, a little bit better. First of all, control the moisture. And here we have the kernel moisture on this axis, and we have the popping volume on this axis, okay? As you get around 13, there are two curves here. One is if you're drying it down, and the other is if you added water back to dried corn. But forget that detail. You can see that the maximum popping is in a very narrow range of moisture. So if you buy a bag of popcorn in a plastic bag, and it's been on the shelf in the store or in your kitchen on the upper shelf, it's very likely that it's not going to have enough moisture. And this is one of the things that Redenbacher did. Redenbacher did three things. One is he put corn in a glass, sealed it up. The second thing that people abandoned when it went big, when ConAgra got in and bought out Redenbacher, is dry it on the ear, okay, rather than drying it in a bin. And the other was to grade the popcorn, because the kernels are the largest at the next to the stalk, the plant, and they get smaller as you move towards the tip. So Redenbacher got into sorting them out by size so that they'd all have about the same popping time. They'd have about the larger kernels would have more moisture. They would pop at a different rate or a time to pop than the smaller kernels. So controlling the moisture. It's pretty hard. For a while, it was awful hard to sell the processors on, it was difficult to sell the processors on a corn that would really be, have good eating qualities. In the 50 to 1 range, okay? 50 volume of popcorn popped to 1 volume of unpopped corn. That's not the case now, because going into these other markets, the eatability is not an issue. And it makes it difficult because developing hybrids takes about 8 to 10 years to do the testing and develop the inbred lines that are going to go into those hybrids. Now, the other thing about, and there are many people here who know a lot more about nutrition than I do, but there are two things that, or one thing that I want to emphasize. There's not an awful lot of difference between how you pop your corn. I've got two slides here, and you can go up and down, and the numbers are not that. You'll notice that however you pop your corn, you get about the same nutritional, but the grams of fat come up and when you pop it naturally in oil, okay? I don't know what to say about that. I'm a little timid because there are nutrition. Okay, this is our farm. It's out on Zeeb Road. We raise cattle. I say we raise cattle. I raise cattle with the help of my grandchildren. Okay, yeah, that's very important. And then I'm a big fan of Wendell Berry. And I want to end there is that I'm at 88 years old, I'm reflecting about who I am. And it's become very apparent to me that I am a product of a landscape that is different from where I have been living, okay? And I have been living in a landscape of urban America, and my concept, my perception, my views of the world were embedded in me in that first 20 years. And this comes out of Wendell's, he gave a lecture for at the Kennedy Center in 2012 entitled, "It All Turns on Affection," okay? And the argument is that if we're not whole unless we are a part of nature, whether it be nature non-human or nature human. But this sort of, when I'm out there at the farm, I live in the town, I live in Loch Alpine, and I feel my comfort and I feel at ease when I'm out there on Zeeb Road. I'm talking a little bit of philosophical stuff now, okay? and I try to extend this to the young people because, you know, many people aren't native to their place. And I'm native to a place in Illinois. For the first 20 years, it got into my unconscious mind, and it made me what and I was in Ann Arbor here for since '66. That's in my mind also, but I see the difference. I have looked with all the eyes I got, and I wouldn't trade the fields behind my barn for all that I have seen. I love Norway. Half of my ashes are going to Norway, but I like this behind the barn better than Norway. Is it time to quit?
Very nice.
How'd I do?
It was great. Does anyone have any questions to ask Charlie, Popcorn Charlie? No? Okay.
I'm going to sit down. That's the longest I've stood in one place in a long time. You guys have been very good.
Thank you, Charlie. One of my questions was, is no pollinator needed? Would bees,
You're
for
going to have to
example,
speak louder.
would bees be of no use in helping pollinate
No.
corn?
No.
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 And what is dent corn used for?
Dent corn? About 300 things. Ice melter, plastic disposal, supposedly decay or ecologically, environmentally better containers, like a bag, a poly bag. And the one big thing that goes, 40% of the dent corn goes into ethanol, okay? I mean, I don't know, this gets very contentious because I know the farmers, I know farmers and I don't know all of them, but they don't understand what people in town are getting upset about, sort of thing, you know. There's all sorts of economic things. Why should we be supporting the farmers to make more money? But okay, now the 40%'s in the ethanol. Now there's another one that every taxpayer ought to look into. A lot of stuff happening out there. We're busy in that sort of thing. The wealthiest guy in Iowa right now, Harry Stein, he's worth $23 billion. And what he is doing is that he is digging a pipeline from his ethanol plants in Iowa up to North Dakota and putting the CO2 from the ethanol plants down in the ground. And he has convinced our government that that's a way to have a sustainable agriculture. I say that because I think the people in the city really don't understand maybe what's going on in the country. And the one person every Friday who writes about this, he's been doing it for years, Alan Giebert. It's in the ag newspapers, telling about what's going on in the agricultural world. So back to your question, is 40% plus or minus some for ethanol, and that took me off on the ethanol thing. I mean, why should we be doing ethanol when windmills and all the other stuff that we should be spending the money on? Other questions, I don't mean to make it. Is that the only question you had, Randy?
Does anyone, oh, we have one in the back.
Simon, wake up.
My question is about the moisture content of the popcorn, right here. My question is about the moisture content of the popcorn. How would a layperson know whether the popcorn has the best level of moisture for the optimal popping?
Yeah, if you've popped a lot of corn, you'll know. If it's too dry, it just won't pop very well, okay? If it's too wet, it'll kind of grunt. You know, you get what's called corn nuts, okay? It doesn't, this endosperm in there turns into a gel under certain, under temperature. It's a sealed vesicle. And when it explodes, it goes out like this. Okay, well, if there's no moisture in there, it's not gonna explode. So it explodes best in that range. Now, how would you know? Only by experience. The first thing is, if you're really into popcorn, buying it in a plastic bag and putting it on the shelf, it's going to get too dry after a month or so. Now, I didn't mention one thing, how you, and you might be interested in this, is that how do you maintain the moisture that is at, say, 13% when it went into the bottle and sealed it, is that, or even the plastic bag, is to put it in the freezer, okay? And keep it cool. Now, there's another thing that comes up is that, have you treated your popcorn with an insecticide to kill the insects? Now, anybody who's had any experience with culinary arts, which I assume most of you guys who are coming to this sort of thing, is that right? Culinary arts? Or maybe not. The Indian meal moth. I mean, people, you've encountered the Indian meal moth. You'll have flour on the table, in your pantry, and you come out and you open up the canister, and out comes a little fly sort of thing. That's a little black fly, and that's the Indian meal moth. So I just recently, within the last couple of weeks, got a call from a gal, and she said, I found, when I opened up the jar, that there was a fly in there. And I said, well, that's good news. And why would I say it was good news? It hasn't been treated with an insecticide, okay? Because all the corn that you're going to buy that goes through these processing plants have been gassed, okay? And they put on the top of a bin, they'll throw in 50-pound bags of insecticide and just seal it up for, you know, because these eggs are going to come in from the field on the corn. There's just no way of getting around it. John Alexander and the Shumways, John Alexander doesn't gas his corn, so it was no surprise to me. The reason why it did is if they would have happened, it was too warm where they stored the bottle. And the temperature got up and those eggs hatched, okay? So putting it in the freezer again would prevent that nasty fly coming out of that jar. Psychology, though, it didn't change the popcorn.
Thank you. I had one more question. You mentioned some of the way the market for or the area for growing popcorn is expanding into countries like Egypt, Russia, Brazil. I was curious whether the people in those countries are eating more and more of the popcorn. Is the market for eating popcorn expanding internationally?
I can only tell you what I believe is happening, okay? In India, they've done some marketing research, and it is, they over there believe now that you can raise a family on, say, 2.5 or 3 hectares where you grow popcorn, process it, and sell it on the street. There's no snack that I know, if you do it that way, that you can't make money. I mean, you go into Bush's and you see some popcorn and they're charging $5.99 for 20 cents worth of popcorn. And so that's what I know about what's happening in India. I think that the people, it's hard to know. Snack foods, I think I'm just going to take a rain check on that, Randy. We'll get to talking about it later. Things are complicated by economics and the rationale. In most of the cases, I think I would imagine that there's money to be made, okay?
I wanted to expand on, you said to store the popcorn in the freezer? Sorry, I wanted to ask about storing popcorn in the freezer.
Yes.
Is that what you should do and then just take it out when you're gonna pop it?
Yeah.
Not, okay, because for some reason I've been keeping it in the fridge.
The moisture won't change in the bottle.
Okay,
Yeah. Now, there's some downsides, and I must, be honest with you. Putting anything in we put the corn in a plastic, it's a recyclable bottle, but that's something that I'm uncomfortable about. I mean, the research that's coming out now is there's hardly anything that's living on this planet that doesn't have some plastics, some evidence of plastics. And it's a little bit like, it was great. I grew up during the 40s, and when plastic came along, man, one Christmas we had everything plastic. This is, you're really into it, about 1945 or 46. And we're modern. But it was like all technologies, they have an upside and a downside. But the moisture isn't going to change just because it's in the freezer, if it's sealed, yeah.
okay. Any other questions? Oh,
Yes.
Is
What?
glass better than the
Wait,
plastic
we
bag?
need
I'm sorry. Is glass better than the plastic bag? To store it?
Is the what now?
Glass.
Oh, definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know, I'm not in the science community. This kind of stuff that I did as a geneticist, man, that's history. I mean, things are moving so fast. But the glass is recyclable, I think, I don't think there's anything you can pin on glass. But the plastic, the water bottles now are believed by people who are measuring plastics and going around and people and their tissues and in the food. It's very unusual to find something that doesn't have evidence of plastic. Now, this is not a scientific meeting and somebody would jump up and say, well, what do you suggest, Charlie? We carry our food around in a paper bag sort of thing?
We have a question back here.
If you store it in the freezer, can you put it right in to be popped, or does it have to be thawed?
Take it out of the freezer and put it in the popper? Yes.
This is a little aside, but my son-in-law gave me a book about the revolution in identifying things in the environment. And in the book it says, Barry Commoner from Washington University in St. Louis predicted that plastic would be our bane, that it would get into everything.
Yeah.
And that was in 1950.
I know that. I'm old enough to know. I actually know one of my students who was on the faculty down there, Warshire. I heard a lot about Barry Commoner. Huh?
I went to WashU.
Did you? Well, now we're going to start talking competition here. I got a granddaughter at the University of Chicago. I got one at Stanford. I mean, okay, I'm just having fun.
Well, we're all enjoying it. Does anyone have any other questions or comments?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. So just so I've got this right, so if the pollen can travel 15 miles, isn't it extremely challenging to really successfully develop an inbred line?
No.
No.
It had to do with geographical isolation.
Right, okay, so you really have to know who your
If you're an
neighbors are.
anthropologist one of the things that you do, you follow language, you follow bones, you follow pots, and you follow the plants, sort of thing.
Okay.
And corn is correlated with the villages. It's a little bit like going through the Caucasus. Hampson wrote a book in 1920 that was written in 1917 about traveling across the Caucasus. And you went from one village to the other, and they spoke different languages. And they were just over the mountain from each other. So, furthermore, they were doing a lot of selection. The short answer to that is geographical isolation.
Okay.
Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you. All right, well, I checked online and there aren't any questions there, but we had quite a number of people watching the stream, so thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming today.
Thank you.
Let's give Charlie a round of applause.